This is Morten from English TV, and I was just about to say that this is a little special issue of yet another episode of Over the Skype. This is and actually a kind of an introduction to a very interesting topic that my colleague Andreas Weber and I am going to reveal during next week. So this is a appetizer or teaser for Andreas. Can you tell us what we're going to talk about?
Oh my God, Martin, we have always those interesting conversations. And I think what we are doing since almost a week or 3 or 4 or maybe 5 months is we think about Drupal. And because this had a big, big impact to everybody in the business this year, and not only this year, maybe for decades. And we thought about what is going in a good way or in a bad way, and are things leading us into the right direction. And I think we have a lot of objectives, and we thought about publishing a story or a series of different stories, and I love to be part of it. And I think also everybody else should be able to contribute, because Drupal is so important.
And now we are mentioning Drupal. So basically, this is an introduction to a series of articles that we have been researching for some time. As you mentioned, Drupal is on everybody's mind these days, especially since we see cancellations from companies. And before we're going to reveal too much of what we're going to present next week, I have a few questions, because you have been in the industry for some years and you have even been doing work for Drupal as well. So, every time we do critical journalism, we always ask if we are bashing people or companies, and I disagree. I think that's the power of the free press and journalism is basically that we have the right and the opportunity and the obligation to write stories of things we believe is important for the industry. So before we talk about that, would you say that you are personally a fan of Drupal? And if in case yes, do you have any personal favorite moment?
Oh, I have to say, and maybe that's not good for me. I joined the first Drupal I joined was in 1977.
Wow.
Oh my God!
Oh my God!
So, long time. I was pretty young at that time, and it was always fascinating for me. And you mentioned that term to be skeptical or criticizing, having concerns. I think if you have a passion for something, and I have a passion for print for sure, and Drupal is, so to say, the key driver for all this passion in my long career. So I'm not skeptical or I'm not criticizing, but passion is also driven by concerns, because Drupal is very ambitious from the very beginning, and it changed the world. Also, the machining industry in Germany would not be alive without Drupal right after the war, because they start to think about Drupal in 1950. And after my first Drupal, I was a normal visitor. I had my best experience in 1990 when I was a marketing manager for Agfa, and I spent 3 weeks in Düsseldorf to get the booth done and also all the work at the show. And after that, I was really exhausted. It was so amazing. It was overwhelming. It was stressing, but it was smart and very successful. And at that time, I learned that there is no other trade show in the world which is something like not only a survival system for the industry, but also a cash machine, because I was on the exhibitor side, and we invested something like 10 million Deutsche Mark at that time, and we got back almost 100 million. So it was really for us important, not only to create revenues, but also to show the world who we are, what we can do, how we can innovate, and how we can change the whole printing environment.
And
that is a flashback.
And you touch upon something that is really important, because I think that the COVID-19 situation, which originally postponed Drupal 2020 to now 21, was, of course, I think it was a big, kind of problem for everybody in the industry, because everybody was like, you signed up for years in advance for the show, and everybody thought it was so important to participate in. And I think also the communication from Drupa after they postponed the event has been like there's a necessity for having trade shows. But is that actually true, you think?
When you go back, and this is what I also did getting prepared for our stories, I just screened. Germany is covering 60% of all the revenues created by trade shows worldwide. And we have the one of the biggest trade show organizers are based in Germany, in Frankfurt, in Berlin, in Munich, also in Düsseldorf. And so when you go to what is preferred by marketeers in the B2B communication environment, the trade show is, beside websites, the number one. 90% of all marketeers say we believe in the success of trade shows. And then you have, for a long, there's a big distance to the next topic, and this is direct marketing and all the typical marketing communication approaches. And on the low end side is advertising in newspapers and magazines. This is preferred by only 20% of marketeers. And the big thing is what is happening when your number one, your darling, is not alive anymore, if it's not possible to organize trade shows. And that's a big thing. And I think nobody of us is now able to think, how can we substitute that? And sure, we have all those digital challenges, but it's not comparable to the success of the personal experience during a trade show.
So that, of course, leads back to the same question I just asked. Because if we can't do the trade shows, is it then not the trade shows dying, but does that mean that the industry will be dying because they can't promote or sell their products? Because I think that during the weeks of research, we have figured out that a lot of vendors have actually sold on budget or close, or some have even exceeded their budgets for 2020. So despite of a postponed Drupa, it seems that the budgets and the new equipment is still finding ways to the PSP. So to ask you the same question again, is Drupa and exhibitions like that in the future as much as a necessity as it used to be?
That's a good point, because we all are branded by Drupa for the years, and even exhibitors and also visitors. And I think we have to differentiate between the necessity of having trade shows and the necessity of having Drupa, because Drupa is the number one in our printing world. And if it's not working in Düsseldorf, for sure we have to find different ways, and there are a lot of opportunities. And I think that the challenge for Drupa was in 2008, when we had the financial crisis, and most of the orders Drupa has created, they got cancelled right after Drupa in autumn 2028, and at least everybody of us survived, even if Drupa was not that successful and necessary as we expected. So I think we will automatically find new ways. The point which is still open is, could Drupa be a catalyst again for the printing industry? Yes or no? And for sure, when you postpone something for almost 1 year, nobody can sit down and wait for the next Drupa. So we have to do business, and this is happening. And as I know, when we had our Inkish Germany tour in August, and also in Switzerland two weeks ago, we met a lot of vendors, and they are doing well again without Drupa. So this is a big issue. And so to say, I cannot hear a good argument from the Drupa organizer side. What makes Drupa really relevant? And I think that's the most important topic we have to talk about.
But in that relation, Andreas, can't help think about, because you mentioned that when you were a marketing manager for Agfa, you had a quite good ROI from attending a trade show, and that was because it was the main channel for selling and exhibiting your products and services. But today, when it's a fact that people and vendors are selling as much without Drupa, uh, this really becomes the bigger question: can we accept having a Drupal just for the fun? Because I mean, one of the things that we have been researching also during this couple of weeks is that how much it costs people even to cancel these shows, right? So is Drupal at all able to gain that credibility in the market based on the cost? We have vendors that have told us that they have like cancellation fees in the 75s. We have vendors that have told us that hotels can be reimbursed. We have restaurants that will not repay anything. So the cost of not attending is almost the same as attending. Don't you think that it will cause huge impact on the brand of Drupal in the future?
Yeah, that's a very good point, Morten, and it's something like the moment of truth. Because when we did that research in the last couple of weeks, I also figured out that most of the vendors, since let's say since last Drupal latest, they have exactly that idea. Does it make sense to invest so much money to create revenues? And I talked at that time, 2012, 2016, to Dr. Linsbach, who was the head of Heidelberg, the CEO, who became ill right after Drupal 2.16 and he had to quit. But he said he calculated that exactly, that really it makes no sense. So you have to invest so much money, it's so much time, you are blocking, you're influencing your own selling cycle because you are waiting for Drupal. This was different many years ago when R&D needs a lot of time to get new products released. So maybe for hardware, 20 years ago, you need something like 4 years, 5 years, 6 years to get a new machine generation. Today, they have it in at least 16 months, 12 months. And software is much faster, so 3 to 6 months. And Drupal was aware of that last time in 2016 when they thought about to break down that momentum 4 years to 3 years. And that would have been great, because then we wouldn't have had this discussion today, because Drupal could have happened in 2019. So it's, I think, from a very from an economic perspective, Drupal is in danger, not because of COVID, because of that calculation you have to make. And I'm not convinced that the majority of exhibitors have economic success. It's something like Drupal, the big brand, and it's important to be there, to show up, and it's good for the image and the brand building, even for smaller vendors.
Yeah, I think
they don't care anymore, and therefore have this huge number of cancellations of blue chips.
Yeah, I can tell you one thing that is also one of the vendors I spoke to during our research. He said to me that in the past, if one, let's say one vendor didn't attend Drupal, rumors would immediately say that it's because they can't afford it, or all the rumors. But now everybody is in the same boat. And that might lead to a new climax where basically people now can say that, okay, we don't need to attend because the return on investment is not sufficient. And also, if you look at it from a Drupal's perspective, I think that just 4 or 5 Drupals ago, it was 440,000 attendees. Now, last time was 260,000 attendees. What is the situation if a COVID-19 infected or affected Drupal will only have maybe 100,000 or even less participants? What do you think the impact will then be for the show?
We have other examples like IPEX, or in Germany, even CeBIT in Hanover, the IT trade show. Yeah. And they started also as a B2B. They tried to convert it into a B2C event as well, because they lost so many visitors. And the calculation of a trade fair organizer is always, if you have more and more visitors, you also can increase the cost for or what you charge to exhibitors. And so when the number of exhibitors is shrinking in that way, And there are certain reasons, maybe because of automation in the printing industry, maybe because of the fact that even for print shops, they have to cover more topics than Drupa is offering. So other omni-channel issue, which is very relevant for print shop owners, is not covered in that way by Drupa. So you can go to purely online marketing events, and that's more useful. That means there are different developments in the market which are related to all the digital transformation issues, which is also attacking not the core value of Drupa. I think we need a concept or an exhibition like Drupa, but not the way it is executed actually. So
the article,
and that's my main point, because when we talk about it, and I have to also to hit my own nose, when we talk about Drupa, it's all about those poor exhibitors. But what about the visitors? What about the print service providers around the globe? Because my biggest concern in the meantime is, how can they get informed properly about the latest developments in a very objective way without having Drupa? And this is, I think, the biggest challenge for all of us, to provide those 100,000 of print shop owners around the globe with relevant information, because they have to invest. And this is a reason why exhibitors and also vendors are still on the good side, and they can profit from that development, because there's still a need for investments and how to make that happen in a good way.
As you have already mentioned, the price of attending a show is not, it's quite big. I think that Hunsdorfer from Heidelberg mentioned that they spent 50 million euros on Drupa, which is of course not necessarily Düsseldorf, but all the marketing, the people, the restaurants, the parties, everything in that perspective. But I think it kind of puts things in perspective, because if you can have a good brand, I think that this week, for example, the Heidelberg Innovation Week is I would say it's just another one of the digital formats, but it seems that all of them are scaling up. If you look at Printing United next week again, they have they have so many speakers, I think it's 90 speakers for almost a full month of education. And that, of course, leads to the recurring thing is, and it's not because I want you to say that Drupa is irrelevant or it's not needed or anything. That's not my point. My point is, how are the exhibitions going to look like in the future? Because you and I, we calculated that the money spent on Drupa and all the following activities in restaurants and hotels and entertainment industry and all those things it's simply unbelievable big numbers. And these numbers are now stuck in Germany right now with Messecenter Düsseldorf and the people involved in it. And this money can't be spent 2 times. So there's a lot of things, and that is some of the things we're going to reveal next week, right?
Yeah. So I would say it's all about the total cost of ownership. It's similar to the fact when you buy a car. Most of my friends they are heading for getting the car for the best price, and then I ask them, and what about insurance and taxes and services and because then when you think in these terms of total cost of ownership, there is a totally different perspective. And for sure, Drupa is good if you spend €1 and you get €2 back. In the past, it was 3 to 10 euros. That means from that point of calculation, Drupa was much better in the past. And today it's something like things in the balance, that you invest money, but your profit you can get out of it, of your revenues you create during Drupa, is almost the same amount. And then you have to rethink your concept. And I think this is exactly happening. You mentioned Heidelberg with the Innovation Week. We had in July, we had June, July, we had Koenig and Bauer doing the Drupa Week. I think they called it something like that. And even Koenig and Bauer is also one of the last big ones who will exhibit next year at Drupa. if it's happening, they still make that experience that using these digital formats and presenting your products, your services, and the benefits coming out of that in a good virtual way, it's also working for them. Yeah, because we learn that since July, almost all the vendors they are still back in a good business shape, on that level, like last year the same time. And that's a good indicator to see they have already found ways to address their audience. But in a long term, it means who can you address when you organize an online webinar? So you need a fan community, and then they sign in. But what about the fact when you have to attract prospects? Will that work in the same way? I'm not sure about that. And so we are still in that phase that it's about trial and error. Yeah.
All of these things we are going to address in a series of articles next week on English News. And I think it will be quite exciting. We're touching upon the consequences for the city and the state of Düsseldorf. What is the consequences for the exhibitors? What are the consequences for the visitors? The cost of joining, how much money do an individual spend in Düsseldorf? What is the following industries? How are they seen, and how are they preserved in this catastrophic situation for things? And we're going to talk about the future of Drupa from our perspective, based on rather good analysis and talking to multiple people in the industry, both current exhibitors as well as exhibitors who has already canceled their participation. Last thing, Andreas, I think that one of the questions, and maybe you won't answer this, or you will, one of the questions that I hear all the time whenever I talk to people in the industry: will Drupa take place in 21?
In my personal view, and I'm very sorry to say that I don't think so. And it has nothing to do with, or it has not only to do with those topics we talked about. It's in fact that Corona situation, and in Germany, like in other countries around the globe, it's becoming more worse right now. And we have to go through wintertime, and wintertime has a strong impact in a positive way for Corona, not for us as human beings. So I think when it will happen, it will be a purely digital event.
And
so that's opinion,
yeah. I don't think that Drupa will take place either for the same reasons as you say, but there's a little addendum to it, and that is the fact that all the news have already been shown. So I'm wondering what is the value if you're going to see old news. I don't think, and I think also to some extent, I think that the trade shows, they really need to redefine their role. I'm questioning whether 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 people trade show will ever happen again, regardless of COVID-19. I think that the risk that people see from a health perspective is maybe bigger than the return of investment in this one. So, but we will touch upon these things. Andreas, I appreciate your time. I am quite confident that the articles that we publish during next week will be read and hopefully also commented. And thank you for your time here. That was great talking to you again, as usual.
Thank you for having me there. And I would be very happy if we are able to attract a lot of people to contribute, and also from the print service provider side. Also very innovative entrepreneurs in that field. We still have them. And it would be interesting also to talk to those people, really the innovative entrepreneurs like Ralf Vogel, Steffen Tomasi from Flyerline in Switzerland, and many others around the world. What kind of trade show offers do you need? And that would be interesting for me as well.
Well, we have now the invite sent out, so let's see if we get some responses on this one. Thank you, Andreas, and talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.